Hello, guys. Welcome back to another episode of the There Is a Floodlight That Never Goes Out podcast. I'm joined by Tom and Ed as ever, and today I'm very pleased to say I'm joined by Simon Evans. How are you, Simon?
Very well, thank you. How are you all doing?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you. Simon, just to sort of get the ball rolling, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself to the listeners, just sort of who you are and what you do at the moment.
Yeah, so I'm Simon Evans. I'm a football and sports news correspondent for Reuters news agency. I'm based in the northwest of England, and having previously worked in similar roles in the US and in Italy, and before that in Hungary.
Great stuff. Sort of back to the start, growing up, was it always your kind of aim to get into football journalism or sports journalism?
It was always an interest. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the first thing I wrote would be my local cricket club, Nelson Cricket Club. I was when I was about 12 or 13. I was the scorer for the second team, and I used to get a phone call off the local paper, as often happens for the cricket reports. Ring up the scorer or the captain or somebody to get it, and they used to ring me for the second 11 details, and I eventually said, "Well, can I not write it?" So that was the first things I wrote were while I was at school, writing cricket reports for Nelson Leader, Burnley Express, newspapers around here. So I'd always interested in it.
Hmm.
Um, but then I went off to university, and I did politics at university. I went to Newcastle, and that sort of distracted me a little bit from sports journalism. But I
Yeah.
eventually, when I went working abroad for a while, I went to Budapest, Hungary, just freelancing, teaching English. After I'd graduated, and I just sort of, as I started writing, I just gravitated towards the football. I ended up watching a lot of Hungarian football, and bit of a weird niche to get into at sort of 22, 23 years old. But I was like, yeah, I was a Hungarian football correspondent for a year or two, which was writing for an expat paper over there, an English paper, and then luckily for me, like the thing that sort of helped me get in with Reuters was Ferencváros, the Hungarian team, qualified for the Champions League, and people needed team news, they needed details. They were in a group with Real Madrid and Ajax, so it was like a high profile group at that time. And so then suddenly I had information and news that people needed, and that's what got me going with it, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so just to track back a tiny little bit, I mean, we've had Joe Crannon, who's just sort of worked in South Africa for a while, and we asked him the same thing. I mean, what is the Hungarian football scene like?
It's changed quite a bit since I was there. I mean, when I was there, it was like '93, so that was just like 3 years after the end of communism. So you had, a bit of a chaotic situation, really, where you had all the football clubs been supported by the state throughout communism, and then suddenly they weren't. Were trying to get from wherever they could, which often turned out to be a disaster for them because the money that was coming in wasn't very stable, um,
Yeah,
and there were a lot of scandals and stuff. Teams had like taxi numbers on the back of the shorts and all sorts of stuff, but the grounds were very run down. To be honest, at the
yeah,
start, I went to a lot of games as a fan. I became a fan of one team. Újpest used to be called Újpesti Dózsa. They're the sort of rivals of Ferencváros in Budapest. And I travelled around as a fan of them for quite a lot. But I went to games all over I was a bit of a train spotter with it, like ground hopping from, I'd go to like 4 games on a weekend. You could get on a tram in
yeah.
Budapest and go to all sorts of games. So the standard of football wasn't great. The crowds were quite low. The hooliganism was a bit wild. But it was great. It was great starting out as a journalist because it was really easy to talk to people and get access. But of course, not that many people cared about what you were talking about, really.
Yeah, yeah. And do you still keep up with Hungarian football to this day? And if so, could you tell us listeners what are the big clubs in Hungary at the minute?
Yeah, I do keep up with it. Yeah, because I learned to speak Hungarian when I was there, and my wife's Hungarian as well. So I do keep up with it quite a lot. The big clubs, the biggest club is Ferencváros. They have massive support across the country, really, not just in the capital. So they're a bit of a sort of Juventus, Bayern, Man United type thing. So that's why you don't support them when you go there, isn't it? The second biggest club is Újpest, but they're owned by the same Belgian company that owned Charlton Athletic. For many years, and have been about as pop. Yes, it's I think it's his son, who's been hugely unpopular, changed the team's badge, which led to a boycott from the ultras. I've got friends who just won't go anywhere near until they change the badge back, until that ownership changes. So, Újpest have fallen on hard times, really, as a result of that. I mean, at that time, when I was there, all the players were Hungarian. You maybe one Serb here or there, or a Romanian. Now it's like one Hungarian in the team and players from all over the place. So, the whole identity of it has changed. Then you've got Honvéd, which is a famous old club that, Puskás in the 1950s, when the Hungarians were the best in the world. A lot of those players, Puskás and others, came from Honvéd, which was the army team under communism, but is now... is now just a smallish club on the outskirts of Budapest, really. So they're the big clubs, and then you've got the provincial teams, from the different Debrecen, Miskolc, other teams like that. But the ones who make an impact in Europe, it's going to be Videoton from a place called Székesfehérvár. They get called Vidi sometimes. They've done quite well in Europe at times. So, those are the main clubs, really, yeah.
You mentioned earlier the sort of football hooliganism. Just how different is the football culture over there compared to it here in Britain?
Well, I mean, at that time, for me, it was a bit like going back to the early 80s, really, because I grew up watching Burnley in the 4th Division for many years, and so you'd be going to run-down little grounds in the north of England with 2,000 fans there, and quite a bit of violence going on the terraces or outside or in the pubs and stuff. It was quite similar in that respect. It was, even though it was the 1st Division there, you could easily have been, at one of those sort of clubs that we used to go, Rochdale away, and it's kicking off down a side street or something. It felt quite similar to that, really, but it was, considering they were the top teams who were playing in Europe, it felt very small time in that sense as well. But that was quite nice in a way as well, because, after the matches, you'd go in the club bar. It was a bit like a non-league ground, really. You'd go in the club bar afterwards, and the players and the manager would come in for a pint afterwards as well. So, it was quite a family atmosphere as well. I mean, the violence stuff was there. The derbies were horrendously violent. The kind of real fighting that you wouldn't see even during most of the hooligan times here, where most of it was running and taunting and stuff. This was like hand-to-hand combat. It was like you wanted to stay out of the way of it. You really did. But it was a smaller scene. People were because they'd been so good in the 50s and 60s and still really into the 80s. A sudden decline to being a team who were losing to, like, in the preliminary rounds of the Cup Winners' Cup or UEFA Cup, they were losing to teams from Finland and Malta and things like that. There was a lot of sort of doom and gloom around football at that time. And it's got better since, they've rebuilt a lot of the stadiums. The government's pumped a lot of money into football. The national team's doing better. They did quite well in the last Euros, didn't they? And then they've qualified again this time. We've got a couple of really good players now. Szoboszlai, who has done really well with Red Bull Salzburg and then gone to Leipzig. So they've got a decent generation of players now, and put it back on their feet a bit, really. Nothing more than that, but at least back on their feet.
Yeah, and obviously you mentioned you did some time in Italy. Were you sort of based at a certain team, or were you covering, just like the Serie A, or what sort of leagues or teams were you covering while you were in Italy?
So, working for a news agency, I was the sports correspondent for Italy, for Reuters. So I had to do a number of different sports. So I mean, overwhelmingly football, but I also
Yeah.
did like the ski World Cup that used to come through Italy, and
All
also I covered Ferrari in Formula One at that time when Schumacher was driving for them, and that was good fun. But no, it was overwhelmingly football. I was based in Milan, so I would be at the San Siro every week covering Milan and Inter. I would go to Juventus for Champions League games as well. Pop down to Rome now and then to see like the Rome derby or something like that. I lived pretty close to where AC Milan's training ground is, Milanello. So it was Ancelotti's Milan team, really. How old are you guys?
17.
Right. Okay, so Ancelotti's Milan team, the one that Liverpool beat in Istanbul in the final.
Yeah.
2003, they beat Juventus at Old Trafford in the final. So you're talking like players like Shevchenko, Kaká, Rui Costa, Paolo Maldini, Costa Curta still, really good team. Seedorf, Pirlo, Gattuso, brilliant team. Really enjoyed watching them. Ancelotti was great then, as he is great now. Really nice bloke. So it's good fun. And then, of course, he had all the nonsense in Italy with like the various scandals that were going on as well. And then got to cover them win the World Cup in 2006. So yeah, I loved it out there. It was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, what was sort of, sorry, Will, I just sort of wanted to interject on, you said about the scandals. I'm really interested in sort of the match fixing. I mean, were Reuters right at the head of that coverage?
No, it was really difficult to cover some of it because there was so much accusation and so much stuff that could never be like properly proven. There were always allegations being made that, this ref has got some business interest with this club official or something. You could never quite nail it down and prove it. What became a huge story was the stuff about they released wiretap conversations of Juventus officials talking to referees and talking about influencing referees, and it never came out clear cut about fixing this match or that match, but they were clearly up to something, and that got them relegated from Serie A to Serie B. And yeah, there was a lot of reporting we did on that, but before that, there were always stories coming out, accusations, innuendo, and like for a news agency like Reuters that deals with facts, it was quite difficult to report a lot of that stuff. So often we didn't, but we would report comments that people made about not liking Juventus or something, and refer to suspicions about their behaviour or something. But it was very difficult to get into the detail just because there weren't any facts there.
Yeah. I was just going to ask you sort of about more Italian football in general, which is, like you said, particularly in the early 2000s, we saw, these teams with some of the great players you mentioned. And I'd say, as a fan growing up, in more recent years, Italian football isn't perhaps at the similar level as it used to be. We've seen like Inter and AC Milan, for example, used to be, the real gladiators of Europe, and now, well, they'll battle it out in the Europa League or something. So, what do you think perhaps went wrong in Italy?
Yeah, I mean, when I was there was really the end of Serie A as the world's top league, really. I mean, at that time it was the Premier League of football at that time. You had, you think about the great players of that era, who were nearly all playing in Italy. Brazilian Ronaldo was there, Gabriel Batistuta, Zinedine Zidane, Pavel Nedved, all these great footballers were in Italy, and they weren't in England really. And in fact, you had players from the Italian league would go to the Premier League at the end of their career, almost like people went to MLS or something. It was like Gianluca Vialli, for example, and Zola. They went very much at the back end of their careers to England. They played their peak in Italy. Hullit, and also lots of players like that. So it was the top league in the world. Where did it go wrong? I think they built that system on having very wealthy owners who were Italians, people like Silvio Berlusconi at AC Milan, the Agnelli family at Juventus, other characters throughout the game. And the games started to become globalized, and you started to get the really big foreign money coming into football. And also the Premier League were a lot better at marketing themselves around the world, with the advantage that they've got, it's an English language product, if you like. So, you know, Americans were more likely to watch the Premier League. People in Asia more likely to watch the Premier League. And the broadcast money started going into the Premier League. You had people like Roman Abramovich going into Chelsea. Then you started having the American owners, who we've heard so much from recently, coming into English football. And that didn't happen in Italy. And they just couldn't keep up. The salaries went up. The money went up in football. Real and Barca were much stronger economically as well. The Italian clubs just couldn't keep up and never really found a way to sort of market themselves internationally or find that sort of foreign investment. And they've started doing that now. They've got a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah, and you talked about, you know, being at the San Siro pretty much most, if not every weekend. I presume that meant you got to see some pretty incredible European nights. I mean, how were they?
Oh, brilliant. I mean, one year we had a Milan derby in the semi-finals of the Champions League. I mean, that was just unbelievable. No, the atmosphere at the San Siro on European nights. You know, people say it about Anfield, don't they? There's a different atmosphere under the lights on a European night, like a year or two ago against Barcelona, that kind of thing. It was the same with the San Siro, particularly with AC Milan. Inter was struggling a bit at that time. Their sort of best spell came after I left when Mourinho went there. But AC Milan in Europe at that time, great nights, you know, packed out crowd, 90,000, 85,000, whatever it was. Brilliant atmosphere, smoke bombs going off everywhere, and superb football on the pitch. So, yeah, a lot of great nights there. You know, it wasn't ever quite the same. Sunday afternoon, a lot quieter, playing against Perugia in Serie A wasn't quite the same thing. But those European nights were unbelievable, yeah.
And just sort of to follow up on that, I mean, you mentioned you saw, you know, the peak of sort of Ancelotti's team. What years were you in Italy?
I went to Italy in '99 and I left in 2007.
Right, because I was wondering, you said sometimes you cover different aspects of Italian football. I was wondering if you were there for the infamous Roy Keane semi-final in '99, but you might have just missed the boat on
I
that
just
one.
missed that. I just missed that. I
Yeah.
saw United play there again. I think it was 2 years after that they played them again. But no, I missed that one, unfortunately.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier the San Siro, and obviously it will be no more in not too long a time. As one of the sort of the greats of footballing stadiums, do you think it's the right time to get rid of it and sort of modernise?
It's not well set up for the kind of things that the clubs make a lot of money from on hospitality and so on. You know, it's not even very well set up for just being able to get a beer or a hot dog or whatever. It's like very limited facilities in there. It's beautiful from the outside with those towers. You know, when you look at it from the outside, it's really impressive. And behind the goals, if you stand behind the goals looking down, it's so steep and everything. It's got a great atmosphere, and it'd be a shame to lose that. But I mean, they've been trying for ages to look at different ways of upgrading it, and they've reached the conclusion that they'd have to just basically rebuild something on that site. So if they ever do manage to do that, and these things take ages in Italy with the bureaucracy there and everything. Roma have been trying to do it, and Lazio with the Olimpico for years as well. So if they ever do get round to doing it, I really hope they sort of manage to capture some of that feeling in the ground that gives it that special atmosphere, because it's a wild place on those European nights. It'd be a shame if it just became another, you know, all-purpose FIFA type stadium, you know.
So you mentioned earlier about, obviously you did your time in Italy and then obviously went over to the States. Were you doing a similar sort of role again? Obviously not just covering football, you were sort of covering a whole variety of sports over in America as well.
Much more of that, yeah. So much less football, especially in the early years over there.
Yeah.
Which I was quite glad about at that time, to be honest, because covering Italian football which can be mad with the amount of stories there were as well, and all the crazy stuff that goes on over there.
Yeah.
It was it was a 7 days a week non-stop thing that I did for 8 years. So I was quite ready to have a break, and do some other sports. So I did quite a lot of cricket in the Caribbean. Covered the West Indies, which was good, obviously. Your colleagues who you send the articles to don't get much sympathy from them when your byline is Barbados. But I love that. Still keep in touch with a lot of people from over there. I've always liked cricket a lot, and I was always West Indies was my second team, like a lot of people. And then I got into the American sports. The aim originally when I went out there was to do like the golf PGA Tour, which has quite a lot in Florida. I was based in Miami, so I was doing the golf that came through Florida, tennis tournaments. Got into the NBA. That became a much bigger thing when LeBron James went to the Miami Heat, and they went on a couple of championship winning runs and some great seasons. And that was, even though the world in Britain isn't that interested in NBA, there was something about LeBron James and that team that was like, it was like watching Messi at Barcelona. Basically, it was you were watching the world's best every other night, basically. So it was fantastic as well. I liked NFL. I did quite a lot of NFL. Went to quite a few Super Bowls and stuff. But I also did do Major League Soccer and the US national team in the World Cup. So I was with them in 2010, and then again in Brazil. So quite a lot of everything really. It was a good mix. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, Tom.
No, I was just gonna say, I know this is primarily a football podcast, but I'd love to know what are the atmospheres in these huge events in the States like, because you say you're watching the world's best in LeBron James and you're watching the world's best in the Super Bowl. I mean, is the atmosphere similar to England as it would be for an FA Cup final, or what's it like?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So there were some nights that at the Miami Heat. So it's the small arenas for NBA, really. I mean, there's only like 21,000 in there or something like that, but it's under a roof, obviously. So, when you get to the playoffs, regular season, it's like go along with your girlfriend and have a drink and sit and watch it, and it gets maybe exciting towards the end of the fourth quarter. There's no tension in the air. It doesn't really matter if you lose. They're playing so many games that you're going to be able to recover. It's not until it gets to the question of are you going to be in the playoffs or not. Then the playoffs are another thing altogether. They are absolutely brilliant, and that then you do get a great atmosphere, and people turn up early, and there's a noise and there's chanting, and then towards the end of some of those games, towards the end of the fourth quarter with the game on the line, and somebody throws a 3-pointer, the place erupts, and so that's really, really, really good. Super Bowl is it's a bit like sometimes you go to, same with World Cup finals, really. There's so many corporate tickets there that, I went, the year New Orleans Saints won it, I went to the conference championship game, like the equivalent of the semi-finals, where they beat the Vikings in New Orleans, and that was, Superdome in New Orleans. There was like 90,000 there under a roof, and that place went absolutely mental. And on the streets on New Orleans, you just couldn't. I went back to my hotel about 2 a.m. after I'd finished work. Couldn't get to sleep for the noise of people partying outside, so I just went out and joined them. And it was brilliant. And then you go to the Super Bowl itself. Those fans aren't there really, and it's people who've got these. It's so expensive. I mean, you're looking at like $1,000 just to get into the final, to the Super Bowl, and so you see people wearing the colours and the jerseys of those teams, but they're not actually people who go to their normal games. They're just people who either rich contacts or through corporate tickets or whatever. They go along, so it's nice as a halftime show. It's a big build-up. It's an amazing event to cover as a journalist because it goes on for a week with press conferences every day, and you can talk to anyone you want and all that kind of stuff. But the actual atmosphere of a Super Bowl isn't as intense as like some of the regular season games in the NFL.
Yeah,
sure we'll touch upon this a bit later with the Super League stuff, but obviously we've seen the Americanization of Western football more and more. So what are your personal thoughts on that?
It's funny what's happened with this past week, because I think when the American owners first came in, there were a lot of people saying, "Oh, they'll try and get rid of promotion and relegation. Oh, they'll turn it into a franchise system. They're going to try and undermine everything that we have in our football." And obviously, having worked out in America and dealt with a lot of Americans who understand our football and like it and love it in some cases, I thought that was a bit sort of prejudiced, to be honest, that reaction. But it turns out that that's what they wanted to do, really. Project Big Picture and Super League, absolutely. It's about getting rid of that element of, promotion, relegation or qualification, that competitive risk. All the American sports, you're guaranteed your place next season no matter what you do. So I'm quite disappointed that they went down that path, really, because I think there are some things from American sport they could have brought and helped clubs and stuff without going down that path, but they just couldn't resist it.
Well, yeah, there's two things I want to touch upon there. The first thing is, the Cronkies and the Glazers have, quite a lot of power in America and certainly in the NFL. Did you ever have any dealings with them?
I had dealings with no, personally meet them. No, I didn't. With Kroenke, I had some dealings with what he was doing in terms of stories, because when he moved the NFL team, the Rams, from St. Louis to LA, the day that it was rumored to be happening, I got on a plane and went to St. Louis and reported the reaction of people as their team moved, hundreds of miles away to LA, and you can imagine what that was like. It's why when people say that, oh, the Yanks don't get it and stuff, they do know what it means. They just they just don't have any alternative to it, really, because those fans were obviously absolute gutted. Weren't people sat around in St. Louis going, well, he's a businessman, it's a franchise, he can move it where it wants as long as the league agree it's legal and blah blah blah, I can see the commercial benefits. No, they were absolutely gutted they'd lost their team, like any other fans would be if that happened. So and the Glazers, obviously Tampa just had a really great year in the NFL and won the Super Bowl. But before that, I didn't get the impression that there was any great affection for them in Tampa either, to be honest.
Well, yeah, they pretty much left that team to rot they won the Super Bowl in 2003 and then sort of let it rot for 15 years. But and the second part of that is, you're a Burnley fan. And they've been taken over by American investors, if I'm right in saying that.
That's right.
What are your impressions on that one?
I don't know, really, to be honest. I've spoken to the owners, interviewed them a couple of times on press conference Zooms and stuff. Alan Pace, the chairman, seems a perfectly nice guy. And the ideas he's come out with, most of them seem, sensible, progressive ideas. But, they've bought the club with a big loan, has to be paid back. A club that's very run as a tight ship, maybe a little bit too tight at times. But, there is a bit of nervousness there. And I don't think what happened this last week will have eased those nerves that, when you have doubts and suspicions and fears about people coming in, you have to be alert to it. So I think most Burnley fans are giving them the benefit of the doubt. Certainly did when they came in. I think they're giving them a chance, but this summer is going to be a really crucial summer for Burnley, because that team's probably going to survive this season, but they haven't been that impressive for most of this year, have they? And it's getting older. It needs freshening up. And, Daesh hasn't been given money for a couple of years, really, to buy anyone of any significance since they spent the money. It's going back 3 years, really, since they've spent significant money on players like Chris Wood and so on. So the big summer, will they actually invest in the squad? Will they give Daesh the backing to go out and freshen it up and bring in some new players? If they don't, I think you'll start to see Burnley fans saying this? What's the benefit? The club's got this debt now, but we're not actually seeing the benefits of foreign ownership. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I think the jury's out on them at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as a Barnsley fan, we're obviously under American investors, and so far we've had Daryl DK to show for it, and that's been enough
Yeah,
for me.
we're living the
so.
dream. Living the American
Yeah,
dream.
the American dream. There you go. So your current role, obviously you are sort of leading coverage of the Premier League and English football. So just out of interest, let's say it comes to a weekend under current circumstances in COVID, are you just working from home, or have you been able to actually get into any of the games behind closed doors?
I've been able to get in, yeah. I've been fortunate. Because we're a news agency and we provide news to, mainly in the case of this stuff, to the international media who can't get to the games, obviously.
Yeah.
Because of that, it's quite useful for the Premier League and the clubs to have news agencies in there, because we can provide, as I was saying, news to many other journalists. So there's a small amount of journalists getting into these games, but luckily, the games I usually go to, I'm not a regional reporter, but just because I'm based in the Northwest, I'm mainly at Liverpool, United, City, Burnley, Everton. I was at Leeds the weekend for the United game. So, yeah, I've been going to games, Champions League games and so on. I mean, it's on the one hand, it's like you feel very privileged that, like, obviously most people can't, overwhelmingly most people can't get into the grounds. But when you're there, it's really sad sitting in an empty stadium. It is. It's not. So I found it quite a depressing experience a few times to leave the ground and just think, you arrive, and I remember, like, for example, the first game of the season was Liverpool-Leeds, and it was Leeds back in the Premier League and at Anfield, and you thought, what a day this would have been for Leeds. I know I'm talking to Barnsley fans, but, for those Leeds supporters, what a day out it would have been. What an atmosphere it would have been. Liverpool, newly crowned champions, would have been a really special, and we won't get those days back,
Yeah.
Next time they go to Anfield, it won't be the first time for 16 years or whatever. So it's a shame, It's been interesting sitting there, and you can hear some of the talk on the field, and you can hear, hearing Bielsa at the weekend shouting his players in his broken English is quite amusing. But it's, sooner the fans are back, the better for everybody, obviously.
We just got an exclusive there, though. Marcelo Bielsa does speak English, so
I think
there you
everyone
go.
guessed that by now.
Yeah, we all
I
knew,
think he was anticipate. He was shouting, anticipate, anticipate. It's that kind of thing, yeah.
I think looking at your job, most people would say, that looks like the best job in the world. You get to go to Premier League matches at the biggest clubs in the country. You get to go watch European games at the biggest clubs in the country. We've asked you about your time in Italy and Hungary, but what are your best memories of covering English football and English European football?
Yeah, I mean, it's only been 4 years, really. So, I came back. I never really, like I said, the only journalism I did over here before I went away was very local cricket type stuff when I was a kid. So it's stuff over the last 4 years. Wow, I mean, there's been plenty of good stuff. I mean, the Liverpool-Barcelona game was something special,
Yeah.
Were you in the ground for that?
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
I mean,
that was one where you don't, you drive, you even have a drive through, get home at 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, but you can't get to sleep after a game like that and an atmosphere like that.
Yeah.
And I'm not a Liverpool fan, obviously, but it was unbelievable, the atmosphere and the performance and just the drama of it all. That was a real standout one. And then obviously it's been great watching City as well. I mean, I do actually like all the Northwest teams that I cover. So I don't, I think the advantage of being a Burnley fan is, I don't have an anti-City, anti-United, anti-Liverpool, anti-Everton thing at all, or any Merseyside, Manchester thing either. I like them all. And when I was growing up, my dad was really good that when Burnley were in the 4th division then, as I was saying, for a lot of it. So if they were playing like away at Bournemouth or Aldershot or Plymouth or somewhere, we weren't that keen that we were going to be driving to 4th division games in Plymouth or whatever. So my dad would say, right, let's go on Everton. And at that time, tickets it wasn't like it is now. You could just, you could decide at 12 o'clock, oh, let's go to Goodison, go, pay your £5, get on and watch Everton, So I watched a lot of Everton, City, Liverpool, United, Leeds over the years growing up, even though I was a Burnley fan. So I've got a affection for all of them in a way, really. So it's been great watching City. I mean, some of the football there is just, and that is one of the privileges of being in the press box, is you get that view that you don't get on TV. So you can see the whole shape of the team and how they play it out for the back and through the field. You're seeing it all unfold in front of you, and it really is a privilege to watch some of that sometimes. Not all the time. Sometimes, it's been a bit slow and the possession for the sake of it the odd time. There's something inevitable about their games against, some of the lower teams. But yeah, that game against Spurs in the Champions League, City Spurs, with all the crazy VAR stuff, and that was an unbelievable night as well, So it's been good. It's been good to watch, United under Solskjaer gradually improve, be able to see how that's happening. Hopefully, the best thing for me in my job would be if all the big teams in the Northwest were doing really, really well and in the Champions League. So I want them all to do well, really.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, sorry, Will, but this is sort of something we covered with. We had a Radio Sheffield journalist on, and we said, how do you not be biased towards Sheffield Wednesday, Sheffield United, Barnsley, and Doncaster? He said, the better the teams are playing, the more chance they have of going to better football matches, and you're sort of saying the same thing there. And I mean, this is probably more opinions based than actually about yourself, but how do you see the progression of Manchester United under Solskjaer? Because he's split in opinion, I'd say, on social media, but personally, I think he's doing a great job.
Yeah, no, I think he's done really well. I mean, considering that they've missed out on so many opportunities in the transfer market. I mean, if you look at the players that they were linked with, who obviously Solskjaer would have wanted, this team now should have Haaland in the middle. I mean, they could have got him for 20-odd million, couldn't they? Bellingham should be there. He was a United target, and Dortmund sort of took him away quite late in the process. So imagine this team now, United, with Bruno playing well and Cavani coming off the bench, Rashford, Greenwood, Pogba, and chucking Bellingham and Haaland into it. They'd be contenders this season, wouldn't they? I don't think there'd be a big gap between them and City this year if the orders have been there. So, considering he hasn't had the greatest support in the market, I think he's done a really good job, and they've got. I hate these cliched terms like identity and stuff, but they do seem to feel like a team now, which they just weren't under Mourinho, and they weren't in the early days of what Ollie was trying to do. So I think they've progressed pretty well. I mean, going back to what you were saying about bias, I should say, when I cover these games, I do really. I cover Burnley games, and obviously, I am a Burnley fan, but I try really hard to make sure that I'm not. And the same when the Northwest teams play the London team. I might say overall that I want Northwest teams to do well, but when I'm writing my report, I've got to be fair to both teams, and I think I try and do that.
Yeah. You mentioned obviously you spent some time watching Liverpool. And I think it'd be fair to say that Liverpool haven't had the season they wanted. From last few seasons where they've been unbeatable, to this season where a lot of people pointed the finger to losing Van Dijk earlier on in the season, but from my perspective, it's been goals at the other end which has been the problem for Liverpool, and that's not changed players wise. So sort of, what do you think's been the issue at Liverpool?
Yeah, I think obviously Van Dijk has had an impact, and the fact that Firmino hasn't had a great season, and that front three hasn't been as effective. The fullbacks haven't been anywhere near as effective as they were the previous two seasons, and they're so fundamental to the way Liverpool attack. I think, you know, the Van Dijk thing, it's not an excuse. He's a massive player for them and everything. But, you know, you just saw Real Madrid go there and beat Liverpool without either of their first choice centre-halves, you know, without Ramos or Varane. So, you know, it is possible to deal with it. And they had Valverde playing, who's a central midfielder, a young central midfielder playing at right back. It's possible to, you know, still go out and get results when you have injuries and so on. So, what I think the problem was that the backup, the strength in depth turned out not to be as good as they thought it was. And if you look at the signings they've made as well, since they won the Champions League, you know, they haven't been top quality signings they've brought in. You know, they've been, apart from Jota. Jota's been one who's come in and you think, right, okay, he might actually replace Firmino here. He gives them something else. If you bring him off the bench, they look more dangerous with him and so on. But a lot of the other players, you know, the defensive players and midfield players just haven't really added much to that team. So they're still, you know, they're playing Real Madrid and they're still bringing, you know, Shaqiri on, you know. Still got Origi as an option there, you know, and you're thinking like, City went out and bought Ruben Diaz. You know, they went and solved their problem. Maybe he's their Van Dijk this year, but I think Liverpool missed the trick by not strengthening a side that had won the title, bringing a bit of competition in there. You know.
Yeah.
Hello.
And
yeah, we've got you.
You got me. All right, good. I was just gonna follow that up on, you know, we're looking now at European semi-finals week. What's your role going to be in covering these games now?
Yeah, so the away legs are done. We have journalists all over the place. So, you know, our correspondent in Paris will cover PSG City. I will be monitoring, you know, what comes out of that game. You know, if there's something in Pep's comments that need dealing with or something like that, helping out from here. But my part will come on the return leg, and when it's at City. So
yeah,
it works like that a bit. Unfortunately, you know, the newspaper guys will go and travel. I mean, well, certainly in pre-COVID time, they will travel over there. I mean, at the moment, it's impossible to. So we have someone in Paris. You know, they might as well do it from there, and I can help out from TV here. So that's how it works out, really.
Yeah, and I bet you're looking forward to sort of seeing Mbappe and Neymar sort of in the flesh when they do come to play City.
Yeah, seen them a few times in the flesh, and they are impressive, especially on Mbappe. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I put something out on Twitter the other week during the Champions League games, and PSG were playing Bayern, and it was like, you know, there's all the talk about Haaland that there was around that time as well. I'm thinking, like, if you were to choose, if you were City, Liverpool, or United, the money was the same. They were all, let's say the wages were about the same. The transfer fee was about the same. Would you be going for, who would you go for out of Haaland, Neymar, and Mbappe? I think I'd go for Mbappe out of all those three. I just think he's a fantastic player.
Yeah. I mean, let's bring that question around. I mean, Will, who are you saying? I'm in agreement with Simon. I'm saying Mbappe.
I think it's hard because I do have this thing for Haaland. I just kind of like him more than him, you know, him as a player. But I think with Mbappe, it's proven over sort of a few seasons, and there's sometimes been doubts whether they can perform in Europe, and I think this season is definitely silenced any of those critics. So yeah, I think I'd probably have to go for Mbappe as well.
Yeah, and yeah, you said that. I mean, we've had the Messi and Ronaldo debate for nearly 15 years now, and it never gets any easier. But for me, certainly, Mbappe seems to be like this just mercurial. You know, everything he does just seems to be like a work of art, whereas Haaland is just this. Maybe this is me undermining him a little bit, and I'm sure you can correct me, Simon. But it just seems to be this raw, aggressive goal scorer who's you know, his physical capabilities are absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, he's a goal machine, isn't he? You know, that goal he set up at City in the first leg, he can play. He's got the technique as well. I think what we saw in those games, it was a bit isolated, wasn't he? There wasn't anyone really around him, and I think if you put him in a side with, if United had him and Rashford and Greenwood either side of him, and throw Cavani in the mix, it'd be unbelievable, and then the same with City. Put him. I'm not sure how well he suits City's way of playing actually, but
yeah.
But no, I think there's more to him than just the physical stuff. But he's got a great touch as well, great skill. He's gonna be. It's almost unfair to ask that question really because he's not there yet. Mbappe's been playing at the top level for much longer. Obviously, Neymar even longer than that. Haaland's just burst onto the scene in the last year really, and you think, what could he become? So if you're signing a player, that's a factor, isn't it? What are you going to get out of Neymar? Maybe. You're only going to get a few years out of Neymar. Mbappe's got a lot to come yet, though. But he's so fast as well. He's just the way he goes past people is just unbelievable. He's got it all. He's got it all. Technique, finishing. I think he really could be one who, in a few years' time, I don't think Neymar's going to be in the discussion for the greatest of all time discussion. But he didn't. Yeah. He hasn't got close to Messi and Ronaldo, really, has he? But
no.
But I think Mbappe could be in that conversation in a year or two.
Yeah.
You talked there about the GOAT debate. What are your personal thoughts? Should we narrow it down to obviously Messi and Ronaldo, seeing the two, CR7 and Ronaldo, seeing the two obvious candidates? What are your personal thoughts?
Between those two, it's really. I think if you were a good team, a really, really good team, and you had the choice of either of the two, I think I'd still go for Messi. Because he can just do unbelievable things. Of course, every time you praise one of them, you've got to say it, and so can the other one.
Yeah.
Because there is such little between them. But if I was picking someone to go into a not absolutely top team, though, I'd be more tempted to go with Cristiano because you've seen him with Portugal, where he's lifted that Portugal team, which is a good team. It's one of the best teams in Europe, amongst the favourites for the Euros. But he just has that ability to just lift that team, that little edge, whereas Messi's never really done that with Argentina, has he? And it's not that they haven't won it; it's the way he contributes to the team. I think if you were bringing someone into a club like, I don't know. It's ludicrous, but if Leicester City, you might be tempted to have gone for a younger Cristiano Ronaldo than a Messi who requires top service all the time. So, but I think as a pure talent and the ability to do things, Messi wins it for me.
My allegiances have always been tied to Ronaldo, and I think that's mainly because he's out of the two. He's the only one I've seen live, and I watched it was Liverpool versus Madrid in the Champions League group stages a few years ago, and it was that was a European night under the lights at Anfield against Real Madrid. And within about 10 minutes, he literally silenced Anfield with just how amazing he was, because you knew already that they were going to, didn't that Liverpool defence think it had Glenn Johnson was marking him? And you just felt sorry for him from 5 minutes in. He was going to have a long night. So yeah, I've always been Ronaldo.
Yeah, I'm the same. Yeah. I'm the same with Ronaldo, to be fair. I think it's very hard to disagree that, like Simon said, technically wise, I think with ball at feet, you'd have to put Messi ahead of Ronaldo. But you're talking complete game and what he brings, mentality wise and just the whole package. I think Ronaldo, it has to be the greatest of all time for me.
Yeah.
The mentality thing is and he's much more made himself into what he is as well. And you hear the stories about what he was like as a kid training at United and the effort he put into it, getting to the levels he's at, the shape he's kept himself in and everything. Absolutely. No, he's a fabulous footballer and has been throughout his career in different guys. And also, you'd have to give him points as well being able to reinvent himself from being like a out-and-out right winger into becoming a centre forward, heading in goals and from all angles and everything. Whereas Messi's made an easier transition to sort of playing that deeper sort of false nine role, hasn't he? So it's really difficult to choose between them. I just think that, if you were to just look at some of those free kicks that Messi scored over the years as well, and again, I'm doing it again. Of course, as soon as you say that, you say, yeah, but Ronaldo scored some amazing free kicks. So there's nothing to choose between them, really, is there?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Simon that like whatever you say, it's always going to be cancelled out by the other's greatness. But I think I'm in agreement with Ed and Will in the sense that I watched Ronaldo when he was at United. I mean, albeit when I was very young, he was just unbelievable. I don't know if Messi came to the Premier League, he probably would tear it up just as Ronaldo did. But yeah, the way that Ronaldo tore the Premiership up at such a young age, it was unbelievable. So, I mean, one thing I want to sort of establish, I mean, Reuters, obviously, you've said it's a facts-based sort of company, so you can't really do speculation. But during a transfer window, what's that sort of like for you trying to cover on them?
Yeah, we are different from newspapers in that sense. So we don't run sort of articles based on speculation, rumors that this player might go here, this player's a target for this club and that sort of stuff. We tend to keep it pretty much to when there's something to report that's based on, if a player says, yeah, I'm interested in them, we'll report that. If a club said, yeah, we're interested in a player, we'll report that. But the kind of stuff that, tabloid newspapers do, which is, based on their information that they've got, we don't really do that kind of stuff. I mean, Reuters sports are obviously a very small part of what Reuters do, and the reputation for Reuters is, it's in financial news, business, politics, a whole range of issues, where our reputation as a company is very much around being accurate and objective and fair and so on. So we don't get involved in sort of political opinion. We don't get involved in running what gets called in the trade flyers, putting out this might happen, this player might go. And that's a fun part of journalism that we don't really do, but we get to do a lot of other stuff that's fun as well. So I can put up with that.
Yeah.
Something that wasn't so fun was the recent European Super League sort of proposals. First of all, what are your sort of personal thoughts on that? And secondly, did you perhaps see this in the pipeline as something that might happen?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it's been reported on for a long time. It's been something that's been floating around for years. But since January, there'd been, definitely you knew that things were going on. There'd been reports. Some newspapers had said we covered some of the documents that came out as well. Still a surprise at the end because, people were telling you the exact opposite of what they ended up doing. Oh, no, we fully support these Champions League reforms. They're great, we're all in. And then they weren't. And never really were, it seems. So it wasn't a huge shock. I think what was a shock was how short-lived it was, the 48 hours it was finished. And it was incredible that they didn't. The club owners or the CEOs never came out to explain what they were trying to do. I mean, put out a press release at 11 o'clock on Sunday night, and then we didn't hear from them again until they said, "Nah, we're not a part of this anymore." So it was quite bizarre, really. I mean, encouraging to see the response of so many fans and players at some stage, although. It was also weird that the clubs clearly hadn't briefed or explained much about it to their managers. That was a bit odd to see, like Solskjaer being the person who had to answer the questions. But yeah, bizarre story. Really, really intense story to cover for journalists. But yeah, I think it's going to carry on reverberating for quite a while as well.
Yeah, I mean, like you said there, it sort of highlighted the vagueness of these top 6 owners and sort of how they can just hide away. It's obviously led to calls for a 50+ run rule perhaps being introduced. Do you ever see that being a realistic thing we see in the English pyramid, and would you personally support it?
The 50+1 thing is very popular because people like the way it works in the Bundesliga. Although you hear a lot of reports as well that it might not last that long in Germany because the Germans look at it as something that's limited their chances to compete with other clubs internationally and domestically to compete with Bayern. So I can see it being something that would work in the lower divisions. It would be something that would stop something like a Bury happening. I think it would be good to see that come in. Although, you see, I don't see fan ownership as like this wonderful solution that a lot of people seem to. It sounds really nice and it sounds great, but I just think, who is a fan? If you're going to have on the board, let's have fan representation on the board. Well, who? As soon as somebody from a fan group goes on the board, stop being just a fan by the very fact of doing that. So, they've got their own interests and attitudes, and you see it happen with clubs when that happens, that fans end up falling out with each other. So I don't think that's something that will solve everything. Don't see how you can do it with the big clubs, though, without going into like massive buyouts. I mean, if you were to bring 50+1 in at Man United, you'd have to buy the Glazers out of like 40% of the shares. How are you going to do that? Who's going to pay for that?
Yeah.
As something to establish, like in National League, League Two, League One. I'm not sure it could work in the Championship either, really. But something that is brought in if a club gets in trouble. Right, okay, you've got into trouble now. Therefore, we're only going to allow this ownership structure for you for the next 10 years or something. That could work. I think it's more a question of having tighter regulations on who gets to own these clubs. I don't think there's a lot you can do about people who've already bought them. But stopping bad owners coming into the game. I know the government review's looking at that owners and directors test about whether it is strict enough. But I think, there's plenty of examples to suggest it's not strict enough.
Definitely. I mean, what do you make of I'm not sure how strenuous the reports are, but they seem to be on good authority about the Spotify owner and the sort of the Henry, Bergkamp and Vieira in a possible bid to buy Arsenal. I mean, could you ever envisage that happening, or is it a case of the Cronkies just basically saying flat out no because they don't want to sell the club?
I don't know. I'd be surprised if they sold it. But what I find interesting about it is that from now on, because of what happened, anyone who wants to buy a Premier League club is going to present themselves as being fan-friendly. Whether they are or not, they're going to come in and say, the smart way to buy a Premier League football club now is to go in, meet the supporters before you even make your bid and say, I am bringing 2 fans on the board as part of my takeover bid. We're going to be fan-friendly. I've got this ex-player, I mean, everyone who's tried to buy Newcastle during the whole time with, what's his name, in charge there? Mike Ashley, sorry, yeah. Everyone who's come in has tried to get Alan Shearer to back their bid. I think we'll just see more and more of that when people come in. So, yeah, of course you get Bergkamp and Henry on board, and the fans are going to go, oh, that sounds good. They're real gunners. They're Arsenal guys. But the Spotify guy, you're just replacing one set of billionaires with another.
Exactly.
He might be better. He might not be. And we'll tell with all of that.
Incidentally, the Cronkies put out a statement 5 minutes ago. I mean, the timing of this is impeccable, really. The Cronkies put out a statement 5 minutes ago saying they were still firmly interested in keeping Arsenal Football Club running and that they didn't want to sell.
Right.
So
there you go.
I think there's certainly a danger in fans getting sort of blinded by, a prospective owner saying they're a fan of the club. I mean, just off the top of my head, look at Mel Morris at Derby and how that's all turned sour. He's a boyhood ram, and sort of sold them the dream. And I think so. Eric Alonso is looking to buy them now, but I think Stan Collymore put out some conspicuous tweets yesterday, which I imagine was just an attempt at trying to rattle the fan base. But I think top six
journalist,
yeah,
Stan Collymore.
Well, he thought about like hearing that they might be in real trouble. I'm talking Bury sort of danger, and it's like you can put all out those ambiguous tweets, get a whole fan base angry with you. Obviously, he's an ex-Forest player, so I'm sure he'll love that. But no, I think certainly. I mean, you said it there about these top six fans. Only a week ago were calling for billionaires to get out of football, and then here comes a billionaire who happens to support their club. I'm not trying to deny his support for the club, but all of a sudden, Arsenal fans have changed their tune just a little bit, haven't they?
And also, like coming in, Spotify. Okay, younger guy, wears jeans and a t-shirt, Silicon Valley. It's a different look than the Glazer, FSG, Kroenke type owner. But is it necessarily going to be better for football? I don't know. I mean, obviously, you need rich owners if you're going to be competing at that level at the top end of the Premier League. There's no doubt about that. But I'm sure Arsenal fans would be just glad for a change, any kind of change. But how much of Arsenal's predicament and their failure over the last 3 or 4 years is really down to Kroenke, and how much is it down to like bad decisions on recruitment, which I'm sure Kroenke has nothing to do with? How much of it is like Emery and arguably Arteta as well? So keeping Wenger too long, not moving on, not building the next generation there properly and stuff. I don't think it's as simple as, this guy's a bad owner. I mean, I've got a jaundiced opinion about him because of the St. Louis Rams story that we talked about, which was, seeing people so upset about losing a team like that. I'm hardly going to have a positive view of Kroenke, but I don't know, man. I mean, I think a lot of this stuff, it sounds really pessimistic and negative, but English football decided that they were going to allow these kind of people to come in and buy clubs a long time ago, and people who objected to it were called Little Englanders who didn't see the way the world had changed and everything. And so this is what's happened, basically.
It's like Pandora's box, isn't it? You let them all out, you can't get them all back in. Just one sort of quick thing. You mentioned there Arteta. At times, he's been hailed as this sort of tactical genius. I'm thinking the win they had against Man United earlier in the season. I mean, obviously, it hasn't gone spectacularly for him there. And, there's a lot of this expectation based on him being sort of Pep's protege. Do you think, it was too big a job too soon for him?
I think, the only reason that you'd appoint someone like Arteta would be for a long-term project. So I think they've got to try and at least see that through another season at least, and see if they can start to make some progress with it. I mean, he was never going to be able to turn it around quickly.
Yeah.
And they've just got a lot of ordinary players, Arsenal. And I think there is something in the culture at that club at the moment. They just see, whenever they come up here, obviously I see them live when they're in the Northwest, and they always seem a bit soft, really, to be honest. They don't seem to have that sort of steel in there that, like Man United Leeds on Sunday, 0-0, not a great game, but it was a really physical game. There was like a lot of challenges going in. And you look at it and you think United, well, McTominay and Fred aren't brilliant players necessarily, but they could handle and mix it in there with Calvin Phillips and everything, and it was like a really good battle. Whenever it gets like that with Arsenal, they always seem to fold.
Well, when you start with an El Neni and Xhaka in midfield, no disrespect, but I don't think you're expecting much.
No, exactly. So I think there's a lot to sort out there, and he probably needs a couple of transfer windows to get. Let's see what he can do this summer with it. But it makes no sense to appoint someone young like Arteta who's going to come in with a particular style of football, or give him the chance to try and develop it. He was never going to be a quick fix kind of appointment. So what's the point of getting rid of him now?
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing one thing that should hopefully take the minds off the Premier League for a little bit, let it cool down, is the Euros coming up this summer. Will you have sort of any involvement reporting on any of the games? So will you strictly be following just England, or will it just be the tournament as a whole?
I'll probably will do quite a lot of England, but I haven't got our plan yet. It's so difficult to plan it because of COVID, and we don't know where we can travel to yet. We only just found out last week what venues are going to be used. So we haven't got the plan yet, but I would imagine I'll be at Wembley for the last 4 games, the semis and the final, and then hopping around somewhere. Originally, I was going to do the group games in Glasgow. I don't know what the plan's going to be now, but no, I'll be hopping around. Usually we get put in a location and cover the games there when we do World Cups and Euros. But so, for example, in Russia at the World Cup, I was with England at their training ground, but I didn't go to all their games. I covered the games nearby in St. Petersburg because there's just so much travel if we're covering every single game and every team. As we do, we don't just cover. We have to cover everybody, not just England. So, but no, I don't know what I'll be doing exactly, but I'll be at a lot of the games. It should be good, I mean, at least it looks like they're going to be able to get a third of the grounds. Have a third of the capacity in most of the grounds, so hopefully it'll feel like a Euros in some way,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard because obviously normally the magic of these tournaments is you have fans from, well, in this instance, all over Europe coming to your country, and obviously they're planning on sort of changing that anyway, having like different grounds around Europe instead of just one like host nation. But like you say, hopefully it will still have that Euro sort of feel to it. Just on England specifically, a lot of people are calling this a bit of a make or break tournament for Gareth Southgate. Obviously, with such a promising England side, should we have high hopes for England?
We should. We definitely should. I mean, it looks a stronger squad now than the one that got to the semi-finals of the World Cup, doesn't it? So. My big concern is whether, there's so much of that talent is attacking talent, isn't it? Attacking midfielders and the forwards. I think he's just got to go for it. And I don't think that's his instinct as a manager. I think he's quite a cautious, conservative sort of manager.
Yeah.
And I'd just go for it, with the players that there are there, you've got players like Grealish and Foden and Rashford and Sterling and Kane. Play them all and go for it,
Yeah.
I really hope Henderson gets, properly fit in time for it, because to play that way, you need someone like him and Declan Rice, and then just everyone else going forward, But that's what I hope will happen. Instead, I suspect we'll be having debates about whether, can Foden and Grealish be in the same lineup, or what about Sterling and Rashford? Can you play them both? What about Sancho? There's so many attacking options, though. I mean, I think we should be looking at winning it, really.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It's like the plethora of talent that we have. I'd argue going forward, it's the best we've had. I even think it's probably better than the golden generation, because that team was packed in defence and midfield, but we're always struggling for sort of a left winger, because we had to sometimes put Scholesy on the left, and Rooney often carried the goal scoring side of that team. So I'd argue it's probably the best England attacking team for 30 years. And yeah, like you said, we're going to end up playing a conservative brand of football that we could have played 5 years ago under Roy Hodgson with Danny Welbeck up front. So it's a difficult one, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, there are questions about Southgate, whether he's got that sort of ability, his game management side of it. He's brilliant at the sort of team building, morale boosting, making everyone feel happy, and all that stuff that went on in Russia. He's really good at all that kind of stuff. But you look back to that Croatia game, and I haven't seen anything since that suggests that he's a manager who can spot a situation and go, right, we're losing our grip on this game now. I'm going to make a tactical change. I'm going to switch to this system, or I'm going to bring this player in and take that player out and turn the game around. The top managers do that. And in those big tournaments, time and again, you see that. I remember when in 2006 I covered Italy, they played Germany, and Lippi was a quite conservative manager. And then he suddenly, against Germany in the semis, threw on 2 strikers and went 4 up top in extra time, and they blew them away, you know? And I'm not sure I see that in Southgate. I hope he proves me wrong with it. He's a brilliant bloke. He's a really nice guy, and has done a good job with England. But I think that there is a doubt still about when we get to that semi-final, will he have that steel and that nous to do the right thing?
Yeah,
I don't know.
When you look back, I mean, during the World Cup, obviously, I'm not going to lie, I was like everyone else. It was brilliant. We thought we were doing amazing, got the semi-final, etc. But I think when you look back at it now, we had the opportunity. We got into the knockouts of the World Cup, and we had to beat Colombia, Sweden, and Croatia, and we would have found ourselves in a World Cup final. And I don't, that in itself is pretty lucky. And I think that was such a great opportunity to get into a World Cup final. I think when you're in the final, yes, France were great, but I think in any sort of final, it's anyone's game, really.
It was a big missed opportunity. Yeah,
I think it's it's very easy to look back and say, oh well, we should have done better here. But I think this Euros campaign, like you say, I think it is fair to say we'll be competing with France and Portugal, etc., because we have got the talent to do it.
Yeah, definitely.
No, we should be looking to win it, definitely. And and defensively is not too bad, I don't think. I mean, I think Maguire and Stones could be a good central defensive partner. I think Kyle Walker's a brilliant right back. There's a couple of good options at left back. Luke Shaw's in really good form now this season, so he looks like he'll probably be the first choice. But Chilwell's a good option as well. So it's not bad. It's not bad at the other end of the field either. Just wonder about. People have always said, well, there's no creative midfielder. We've got defensive midfielders like Rice and Henderson, but have we got the creative player? Well, we've now got so many creative players. There's not a classic central midfield necessarily number 10, but if you look at players like Foden and Grealish, or even Maddison, if he finishes the season, gets himself sorted out, he's probably missed a boat a little bit though with the way things have gone over the last few months for him. But Grealish and Foden, with those players up top in front of them, it's an exciting prospect. But we haven't really had the chance to see it yet, have we? Though, with all the players who pull out during international breaks and injuries, and But I'm excited about England at this tournament.
I think Matt has to be in the conversation as well. Because every time I see him, he impresses me more and more, and he's sort of developing into more of an 8 role. Becoming more sort of spatially aware. Not just going forward. So I think, and it was the sort of joke, wasn't it, about, Southgate loving Mount over Grealish. And that debate's now sort of moved to Grealish versus Foden, obviously hoping Grealish is fit. So I think Mount, whether you agree or disagree, he'll be starting in the summer by sort of past sort of what Southgate's done in the past.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Yeah. And then Bellingham, how does Bellingham come into the picture?
It is a hard one because I was so impressed by Bellingham against. I mean, you hear about him and sort of Sancho playing over in Germany, but you don't see an awful lot. Or when you do, people say, yeah, but they're playing against some German team you've never heard of. But I think in the Champions League, when they played against City, I was very impressed by Jude Bellingham. At his age, I thought he was, looked really good. I think for the future, he's one of England's most exciting players.
I agree.
Yeah. And the mental thing is, we've got a friend who will go nameless, but we've got a friend who's played against Jude Bellingham. And now now it's our era. I'm sure you went through this, Simon, but when you get to the age and you go, we're really not going to be footballers, are we? And it's odd to see people our age playing in the Champions League. It has to be said.
Yeah, it really is.
I just want to sort of rewind a bit, and I've got to say, you seem to have the best job in the world. Firstly, Simon, I mean, some of the games you get to go to, it's rather incredible. But we were talking about a Spaniard, and I'd like to move on to a snake, or at least that's what Alexander Seferin called him, and that's Andrea Agnelli. And you spoke to him last week. I mean, what was that like?
It was a bit bizarre, really, because we found out on the Tuesday during the day we were told we'd be able to interview him. At that stage, the 12 were still 12. You know, they were all in. So it was going to be, set up. Felt like it was set up to be the first sort of major interview with one of the Super League owners, because we'd heard nothing from the English clubs. And Florentino Perez stuff had been out there as well, but no one else had come out and really talked about it. Yeah. That's what we were prepared for. And then, of course, in the evening, everyone pulled out, and I was just waiting for the phone call from Juventus to say, no, he's not doing the interview. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. But in the morning, they confirmed it. Yeah, he came on, and he didn't look like he'd had a good night's sleep. I have to say that. But he came on, and yeah, it was one of those things where, I just asked him straight, you've got 6 clubs left. Are you still going ahead with this? And he said, well, to be honest, no. And it was a video interview as well. So obviously that went out very quickly as a news and got a lot of use and a lot of play. But it was, it was a strange one. He seemed to be a little bit in denial some of the time, and then some of the time he seemed quite depressed about it all. These people convinced themselves that this was going to happen and that everyone would just realize what a genius idea it was. But they never actually went out and explained to people why they thought it was a good idea. They never tried to convince people. I think some people, and I'm not sure that all the fans of the big 6 clubs in England would have been so against it if the owners had come out and said, you know what, football's changing. It's not going to be the same. We're going to be in this group. We want to have a connection. We want it to be open. We don't want it to be closed. If they'd have come out and talked about it, or they didn't. And people like Agnelli were just convinced that they had a genius idea, and it would just come to fruition because they were so powerful.
Yeah. Do you ever get nervous interviewing people like Agnelli and these big stars? Because I certainly would. Or is that something you've just grown to sort of get used to over time?
Yeah, a little bit you do. A little bit you do. You want to make sure that you don't. And the worst thing you can do in a situation like that is forget to ask the right questions, the big questions, So it's not so much nervous of with people like that of being overawed of talking to somebody famous or in the news or whatever, because I'm doing that for quite a while now. I mean, you do still get a buzz, don't get me wrong, and you do still get a little bit on edge when you're talking to somebody, and top stars and managers and things. If you're asking Pep a question at a press conference or Klopp, do you get a little bit nervous? Yeah, you don't want to ask something stupid or mess things up. So, a little bit of tension in yourself. But it's more a case of not messing up, especially when you're doing it for video as well. There were times earlier in my career where I'd interview someone and afterwards I'd think, why didn't I ask him that? Oh my goodness, that would have been the news, It's part of the learning process, and you just do your homework and you prepare yourself so you don't do that. But that does involve a little bit of tension and nerves. Yeah, you do.
Yeah, and I think, like Ed said, it's something that we're trying to deal with on the podcast. I mean, we'll get players who played for my club, Barnsley, on, and it's like you're a wreck beforehand. But yeah, it's always about the questions. And the next question I'd like to ask you certainly is, this is probably more hypothetical than factual. But after the Super League, I asked the boys their thoughts on the future of football and sort of asked them to make 3 predictions. Do you sort of have 3 predictions for the next sort of decade of English and European football? I'm putting you on the spot a bit here, so
you are a bit, yeah. I mean, I wrote an article at the weekend saying that although the Super League is dead, super projects in football aren't dead, and I think the next big thing we're going to see a big row about is FIFA trying to expand and make more regular the Club World Cup, which will almost be a kind of Super League in itself, really. At the moment, they're just talking about doing it once every 4 years, which wouldn't be that disruptive. 24-team tournament with, like, you know, Boca Juniors and Flamengo in there, and then 8 teams from Europe, and, you know, maybe more than 8 teams. Maybe half the teams will be from Europe. But a lot of people suspect that Infantino at FIFA would like to make it an annual tournament and sort of stop domestic football every year in January for it or something like that. You can see these sort of ideas. Wenger was talking recently, who works at FIFA now. He was talking about having the World Cup every 2 years. So there's going to be loads of these battles going on. Everyone's still searching for those. You know, there's this constant idea that there is more and more money that could come into football if only we had more games between the big clubs and the big nations and so on. So I think that battle is going to carry on going for a long time, and it could see some serious conflict between, you know, UEFA and FIFA again, and between the clubs and the governing bodies. So there's going to be plenty of trouble to come. It's not like the Super League's been seen off and then we can all go back to the status quo and everything will be fine. I don't think that's going to be the case.
Yeah, that is unfortunate. I mean, also, I mean, we've sort of touched upon it earlier, but the future of your side, Burnley. I mean, let's face it, the past 10 years for Burnley have been rather incredible, haven't they? So, I mean, how do you see the next 10 years for the Clarets?
I think really a lot depends what they do this summer. You know, I think if Dyche stays at the club and is able to reinvent the team a little bit and reinvent himself and build on those foundations, on incredibly solid foundations that he's built over these last 5 seasons, and, you know, no reason why Burnley couldn't be looking at another 5 or 6 years in the Premier League. Mm-hmm. If they get it wrong this summer, if they try to rebuild with Dyche and it doesn't work, or if Dyche goes, I haven't heard that he's going to go or anything, but there's always talk that other clubs might come in for him and so on. I mean, his record is pretty solid. And yeah, it could fall apart quite quickly at Burnley, I think, if it goes wrong. So this summer, I think, is absolutely essential. If they can just, you know, they've got some of the younger players there. There's some good players. I mean, Charlie Taylor's left back, I think, has improved a lot. Brownhill's done really well since he's come in. You know, obviously, McNeil, if he can start improving, he's got a lot of potential. But, you know, will they keep hold of Pope? Will they keep hold of Tarkowski? Will they keep hold of McNeil? You know, a lot could happen this summer. So it sounds like a bit of a cop-out. It depends what happens this summer. But I think it goes one of 2 ways, really.
Yeah. I mean, this has been pretty sensational. So, I mean, I think it's going to be sort of last rounds, but this has been, if this was a night out, it's been a cracking night out. So
I've enjoyed it too. I'm glad it's worked out. Yeah.
What's the last drinks orders, lads? Have we got any final chasers for Simon to answer?
I think I've asked everything I wanted. It's been really enjoyable. Just quite good to have a chat. So yeah, thanks ever so much for coming on, Simon. We really do appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. I've enjoyed it. No, it's been good.
Yeah, like I said, it's been one of my most enjoyable to record soon. Thank you ever so much for coming on.
Welcome, anytime.
If you're listening on YouTube, please do subscribe to the channel and like the video, and we'd also love it if you could drop a comment. If you're listening on Apple, please do subscribe, and if you've enjoyed it, give us a review. On Spotify, as always, you can follow us, and on Twitter, you can follow us at Floodlight Pod. Once again, thank you to Simon for coming on, and thank you to the listeners for listening.